Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to this Mobility as a Service MaaS Market Playbook webinar, what we organize as the MaaS Alliance. My name is Pia Karjalainen. I'm Secretary General of the MaaS Alliance, and I really want to welcome you to join this 1-hour webinar with us, where I first present the MaaS Market Playbook that we prepared together with our members last year, and it was published just a few weeks ago. And then you, of course, have a chance to ask questions what you have regarding the playbook and the implementation of the playbook. So welcome. First, some housekeeping advices or rules. So it would be great for the interactive part of the webinar if you could rename yourself so that we can see for the questions who you are and where you're coming from. And also, as I said, there is a chance to get your questions answered during the webinar. So if you have any questions regarding the playbook, please submit the questions via questions functionality of GoToWebinar, and then I will take your questions either directly during the presentation or after my official presentation, and then they will be answered. Also, if you have any questions coming later on, maybe after you have had a look at the webinar, you can always just contact us info@maasalliance.eu, and that is also another opportunity to get in touch and sort of like have a further discussion on this very nice topic. So let's move forward. So before I actually start to present the playbook itself, I was thinking it would be useful for the audience also to know why we now prepare the playbook and who we as the MaaS Alliance are. So the MaaS Alliance is now 5.5 years old organization that was established in 2015, and our roots very strongly links to international intelligent transport system ITS community. And the MaaS Alliance, it was established in ITS World Congress in Bordeaux in October 2015, and back then we were very like European focused small community of like-minded mobility as a service enthusiasts. Today we are a global, truly global association where we have members from Europe, but also strong presence in Japan and Asia Pacific market areas, and similarly from North and Latin America. We bring together 110 members, and our membership represent both public and private mobility sector stakeholders. So around 50% of our membership are coming from the different public bodies, including ministries, cities, public transport authorities in a local level, and then the other 50%, they are coming from the different private companies and organizations providing mobility as a service or related services for the market. And there we have MaaS platform providers, technology companies, consulting companies, public transport service providers, cycling industry, insurance companies, and so on and so on. And we very much work in that public-private partnership and also in public-private interface, because we need to understand that for something as complex as mobility as a service, we need to have that really good partnership and really good understanding also on the interest and incentives of the other stakeholders on board. And that was one also like motivations why we thought that the playbook is now needed, because we wanted to make the drivers of the different stakeholders in the ecosystem more visible, so that everyone understands what the partners expect to win or get out of the mobility as a service when start the collaboration to develop the services. And on the other hand, we need to understand the challenges and cost related to the other stakeholders. So partly our intention when we started to draft the playbook was really to create that better common understanding on the reality of the different stakeholders and their expectation, but of course on the other hand also to come with the suggestions for the good code of conducts and principles for the partnership and collaboration. So this here you can see our global presence as the MaaS Alliance, and it in addition to the public and private sectors, it's really a nice combination of different stakeholders. The common denominator is that all of our members are working actively already with mobility as a service implementations, and they really strongly believe also that mobility as a service can play and should play a key role in our mobility sector also in future, in order to provide users and societies and our environment with better and more sustainable mobility services. So we have there, of course, data providers and data users. We have players with different business models. We have companies who are working more locally, and then we have global players, and then we have companies and stakeholders which are sort of like market disruptors, but we also have incumbent market players. And this is sort of like very well demonstrates also the market and the sector what we are dealing with. But now I go to actual topic of today, so the MaaS Market Playbook. You can find it from our website. I hope that many of you have already had a look at it. So it's available there, www.maasalliance.eu. And basically it includes 4 different sections or chapters. First of all, we wanted to reflect bit back and go back to the mobility as a service of our alliance's white paper that was published 2017, where we clearly indicated the vision for mobility as a service, what we wanted to achieve and how we wanted to see the mobility as a service market and sector to be developing. There in the white paper, we strongly committed to support MaaS development towards, first of all, sustainability. We wanted to make sure, and we still want to make sure, that the mobility as a service solutions that are developed, they will bring us more sustainable mobility services than the current or than the conventional transport system can deliver. So sustainability is very important part of our vision. Then comes inclusivity. Mobility as a service should serve all the different user groups and be something that all the users find attractive to use. Third very important point is, again, that public-private partnership, that we truly think that only by making public and private sectors to work together so that the interests are also aligned, we can provide mobility as a services that are adding clear value for the users but also societies. And the fourth point is that we strongly believe that we should aim to have an open ecosystem for MaaS services, meaning that from the regulators or government side, we shouldn't choose any winners or losers. We should remain business model neutral, and we should remain technology agnostic, and let sort of like different innovations, different organizations and different business model to exist and coexist in the market, so that eventually it will be the end user who can benefit from the variety of the different services in the market, and also that it's always the user who can choose and decide what kind of services they want to use. So the reflection to the white paper 2017 is the starting point, but then we wanted to use all that new knowledge and insights what we have gained from the mobility as service market since then, and first of all sort of describe how we think that well-functioning mobility as a service market would look like, and how we can make sure that there are no externalities appearing in the market. That is the second chapter. Third chapter is where we look at the market expectation of the mobility as a service market in general. Also sort of like reflect how we think that the COVID will change that, and what kind of impact COVID might have in the future development of MaaS services and the market. But also in that chapter we analyzed the expectation of the different stakeholders in mobility as a service market, and what are the expected opportunities, but also maybe motivational blocks in the mobility as a service market. And finally, which is really core of the playbook, is that we also suggest 8 principles for open MaaS ecosystem that will result benefits for the users, our societies, and environment. And those 8 principles are really now something what we as a MaaS Alliance are committed in all our actions, and also very well defines the future of mobility, what we would like to achieve by working together. The playbook was drafted last year. Our members were really playing a key and fundamental role in all the phases of the preparation. So the playbook, what you see, is really a result of the collaborative effort of our members. We had several workshops, we had several surveys, what we did in order to test different ideas and find a way which is sort of like understood as the best and optimal way forward. And then of course it went through many rounds of iteration and many rounds of approvals, but finally it was published now in March, a couple of weeks ago, and I'm really proud to present it to you right now. So if I start a bit describing what we think about the regulation and the governance of mobility as a service, this is also a subject what I have been working with almost 10 years now in national and EU level as well, and now of course in the MaaS Alliance. And this is also very much giving the justification why we paid so much attention to this governance and policy discussion in the playbook. One of the most heard question in mobility as a service is that, yeah, how we organize the policy, how we govern, and how we should regulate this emerging market. And that is of course really good question, and also there is not like really one size fits all solution available, but we wanted to bring forward some key elements or principles what are more or less applicable in any environment. So in the playbook we wanted to really provide you a global insights and global suggestions which are not depending on any specific market conditions. But sort of like describe what we think that is not necessarily true is, first of all, that quite often you might face a misconception that mobility as a service somehow requires completely deregulated environment, some kind of like a regulatory Wild West. According to our understanding that and knowledge, that is not true, but we truly think that MaaS actually benefits from the strong regulation, but the focus of this regulation should be more in delivering impacts and be strong, for instance, when it comes to environmental compliance, consumer rights, and competition law. The second misconception what you might come across with is that MaaS cannot be developed in our existing regulatory framework. That is not true either. It's of course true that there are many hindrances in a market and some challenges what the market stakeholders have to find good way to solve it. But on the other hand, they are much more related to operational missing building blocks that can be related to availability of the data, market access issues, or access to ticket resale that we can for sure also solve together. Third point is that sometimes you might hear that MaaS requires a completely new regulatory framework, and that is not necessarily true either, but we strongly believe that especially in the EU level, there is a good regulatory framework at place, but sometimes we don't see the enforcement or like a full compliance with the existing rules. For instance, when it comes to competition regulation or competition law. And finally, often, especially when we discuss about the data markets or digitalization and digital services, there is questions if mobility as a service bears a very strong risk on monopolistic market development of winner takes it all model. That is something what we in the MaaS Alliance very strongly believe that we can prevent together by creating that open and competitive ecosystem where we have different innovations and different market service providers having a similar, equal, and fair and non-discriminatory access to the market, because then we can empower the users so that they can really choose from the different service providers, and we also sort of can control that we don't create any gatekeepers to any level of the market. So in our thinking, and what we also present in the playbook, we first of all wanted to separate regulation and the governance. And when we talk about regulation, what we mean is the regulatory framework, what is crafted and implemented either on national or multinational level. And we think that with regulation, the focus should be in creating the basic preconditions for mobility as a service. It should focus on the data exchange and availability on the data, creating rules for data sharing. It should give preconditions for the integrated services, and it should establish that competitive environment where it's easy for different market stakeholders to enter and exit from the market. We also think that one of the most important things or most important goals with regulation is to build trust among the industry stakeholders. It should be there to set up a clear framework facilitating the development of the industry and also preventing the market fragmentation, and it should create a predictable environment for the investment both for public and private sector stakeholders. And also the regulation should be a tool to guarantee user rights and make sure that users can feel comfortable and convenient when using the services. And then the other important role of the regulation is to prevent market externalities that can cause any undesired societal or environmental impact. They can be related to congestion, noise pollution, and that can then detract from the value of services for society or the users. So maybe we can look those market externalities a bit more, and this is something what you'll find from the playbook. So we have created sort of like a checklist for the readers and the users of the playbook that they can use to monitor the market development and to make sure that there is not desired externalities appearing or occurring in the mobility as a service market. We have classified them or categorized them in 6 different categories. First is very much about the availability and exchange of data, how much and how well and how good quality data is available. The second is about market dynamics, about ease of market entry and exit. The third group of externalities are existence of business opportunities, so again related to market dynamics. Fourth is about added value of partnerships, creating that motivation for different stakeholders to work together. Fifth group is about more competition and antitrust. So it's there to provide a checklist to monitor the absence of antitrust issues and abuses of dominance in market. And finally, the 6th category is about achievement of public interest objectives with mobility as a service. So please have a look if you are interested of that part. So that was about regulation. As I said, regulation was the national or international framework. But then we truly acknowledge that mobility and mobility as a service is still quite a local phenomena, and there is a lot of local conditions and local market dynamics and local cultural differences, and also differences in the transport supply and demand that might require and often do require more local approach, and that local setup of the principles we call governance, and that is there to ensure that the public interest of local governance cities or region is aligned, or like the mobility as a service results are aligned with the public policy objectives and expectation of the public authorities in the local context. So it should be there to ensure that MaaS services deliver the best possible outcome also from the public authority point of view. So it should set up framework for accountability towards desired policy goals, and it should also, in our thinking, enable framework or create framework that creates good conditions for coexistence of different technologies and different business models. And what is important in the governance framework is that it should be really take on board of different views and expectations of the local players, and we truly believe that it should be also very much designed in a collaboration and with participatory approach by the public and private sector, including all different market newcomers. So let's have a bit more closer look on that, local governance. So in the playbook, what we suggest is a local code of conduct model. It can be also called mobility pact, as it has been done also already in some cases. But we truly believe that code of conduct in a local level or regional level would be a good tool to ensure the delivery of the societal goals, and also create that accountability framework for mobility as a service. And therefore, in the playbook, we wanted to suggest sort of like a content for the code of conduct, touching the following points when it comes what kind of obligations the city or the public authority can require from MaaS or mobility service provider. We have suggested some provisions related to inclusivity, customer care, appropriate and secure use of data, responsibilities toward business partners or partners in the ecosystem value chain, some requirements for the user experience, and also some requirements as responsibility of service providers towards public authorities. And I wanted to provide you one example how we have now documented it, the requirements in the playbook. So here I took the part where we discussed about inclusivity, and there, for instance, we suggest that the MaaS or mobility service provider could be required to provide accessibility and assistance at no additional cost for passengers with disabilities and passengers with reduced mobility across the region. We suggest that the MaaS or mobility service providers declare clearly the strategies for delivering information and services, also via non-digital means and people who don't have access to bank accounts or credit card, and also several provisions related to providing equal access and really clearly making sure that the services don't discriminate anyone. So just to give you an idea, and of course then you find several similar setup for the customer care, use of data, and so on and so on. Well, in the code of conduct also, we suggest that then public authorities commit to certain provision towards the market players, towards the MaaS operators and mobility service providers. Those requirements or obligation could include reducing the risk of market dominance, creating that trusted environment for data sharing, for instance, facilitating quid pro quo principles or data reciprocity, support development and require use of open standards developed for mobility as a service, and so on and so on. So just that you see that it is supposed to be sort of like a balanced act or set up between the mobility service providers or MaaS operators and the public authorities, where both sides give and take something, so that we can have that jointly created and very balanced setup for local governance, so that everyone feels comfortable, but everyone also feels motivated to participate in delivery of the services. So that was about the regulation and governance. Then in the chapter 3, in market expectation in the playbook, we look a bit more in details. What are the expectations of the different stakeholders when participating in mobility as a service value chain? And we have analyzed the expectation of 8 different stakeholder group. We have their public transport authorities, we have public transport operators, cities, national and regional authorities, automotive industry, fleet managers, cycling industry, technology providers, consulting companies, and MaaS operators. I won't go through all of them now, but I just wanted to give you some insights or ideas like how it looks like from couple of examples. And this part of the playbook was prepared in a way that we had a surveys and interviews with our members coming from those roles. So basically everything what is said here is coming from the MaaS Alliance members who are representing, for instance, in this case of public transport authorities. So they said that in mobility as a service, they expect that MaaS could help them to deliver key policy objectives, enhance collaboration between public and private organizations, provide integrated multimodal mobility services, and steer development of and uptake of MaaS services. Why they see that they might have some missing preconditions or motivational blocks due to the fact that there are fears that MaaS services encourage unsustainable modes. They also think that focus on MaaS can compromise other responsibilities and delivery of services to all, and they also have experienced lack of resources. And this is important that we identify the opportunities and the sort of like challenges of the other stakeholders in addition to own, really to understand that when we are working together in such a complex system than mobility as a service, we have to all the time also take into account how we can create sort of like a sustainable partnership also in that sense that we make sure that everyone is the win-win situation, and therefore this kind of like understanding on the challenges and opportunities of others is really super important. I just take also another example from cities. So similarly, cities, they expect that MaaS can help them to deliver key societal objectives, but also they think that MaaS can help them to collect and gain useful data insights to enhance efficiency of transport system. They hope that MaaS is a tool for them to make a good progress as a city lab, and also maybe result in some rethinking of public spending or even sort of like a savings there. On the other hand, cities feel that there are some opportunities for greedy behavior in the MaaS market that might not then result in enough welfare-centric use of transport. They would like to see or have more clear KPIs for mobility as a service market, and also a stronger commitment for long-lasting partnership in the market. So there are several examples, but it's better that you maybe take time and look from the playbook itself there. And then the 4th chapter, which is really the main content of the playbook, is something where we wanted to describe our more detailed vision for the development of the mobility as a service market based on the 8 key fundaments or principles. And first of them is that we strongly truly believe that open ecosystem is the best way to deliver innovations for our transport system and societies and create that choice for the users, so that with mobility as a service we can re-establish or recreate that freedom of mobility that privately owned vehicles or cars were supposed to bring to us 100 years ago, but now this time we would like to make it more sustainable. So this is O for openness. P in this context is for people. We truly believe that mobility as a service, everything around mobility as a service, starting from the platform design, from the governance, regulation, and the partnership, should really put people in the center, and all the time we should have in mind that how we can make this as appealing for the users as possible. MaaS has really strong potential when it comes to decarbonization of our transport system, up to 30%. But if we don't manage to create services that are really appealing for the users, we cannot unlock that potential. And therefore, having people in very center is so super important. We also clearly communicate our commitment for consumer rights and customer rights also in the data exchange environment, so that we can really respect the private data of users, and also let the users decide how much data they want to share. We also here commit for the and support the My Data principle, where the the data provider can decide how much data they want to share and have a full control on the use of data. We also here with letter P want to suggest that we would like to see more incentive schemes where the incentives are directly allocated to the end users by providing different micro subsidy schemes or something else. Again, encouraging that user choice and putting the market service providers in the more equal footing with each other. Letter E is for engagement. Mobility as a service is something what we need to create together and really work together there. And it's also close and very seamless collaboration of the physical and digital environments. And we cannot sort of like choose any of those where we want to focus more, but we have to equally develop both sides of it. Letter N is for new way and more strong and deep partnership in mobility as a service, in mobility and mobility as a service. We think that we should look we should study the way how public and private sector can work even more closely together and understand where the different modes are used in a most optimal way. And now with COVID times, there has been already really great examples here on the very agile and co-design manners. There we also wanted to encourage the use of public procurements quite strategically, so that public procurement schemes could be used to, for instance, facilitate the data exchange and use of the open standards for MaaS. Sorry. I need to go back. Yeah. Letter M is for market dynamism and trust. It very much highlights the market monitoring as well to see that there is no externalities developed, but also there we want to encourage the regulators also to pay attention on the market fragmentation, so that we could create scalable and roaming mobility as a service services in different places. Letter A is for advanced data sharing and models and incentive schemes. For both for data sharing and incentives, we need sort of like a more people and less mode-centric approach. And also for, especially for the data sharing, we really need to study even more different options there, starting from the voluntary data sharing to reciprocity, and then also for the commercial data sharing schemes, in order to make sure that we find good models encouraging wide data exchange. Another letter A is for access to critical assets. There we think that that while we want to really make sure that public transport is the backbone of mobility as a service, we also need to acknowledge that if we don't have access to resale of public transport tickets or services, they cannot be integrated to mobility as a service schemes. And that synergy and that partnership is something what we still need to enhance and find good ways to create that win-win situation there. And last but really not least, it's just because of the order of the letters, there is our clearly communicated strong commitment for sustainable of creation of sustainable MaaS services, and also exchanging information widely about environmental performance of mobility as a service schemes and services. So this is now how we see the future of the mobility as a service. And my last slide before I start to take your questions is that I just wanted to mention that the playbook was something, as I said, we and MaaS Alliance members together put a lot of focus and effort last year. And for this year, we have a slightly different agenda. But if you are sort of like interested to be part of preparation and at that co-design process, similar what resulted the playbook, please do get in touch with us. Here you can see our work program for this year, and there are quite many interesting and nice activities going on. So if you want to maybe join our community or discuss a bit more what we are doing in the MaaS Alliance and how to get involved or engaged, you can contact us via the addresses what you can find from this slide. But let me now open the questions what I see from here, and please also, if you have any additional questions, use the question function to insert or submit your questions. So I see one question here regarding social equity measures. How Playbook addresses how MaaS can enhance social equity. So this was submitted quite in the beginning of the event. So I hope that already that part where I described the different responsibilities as a part of code of conduct that the city or the local authorities can put forward for the MaaS or mobility service providers was partly describing how we are addressing that. But basically there was really strong suggestion that we create an environment and mobility as a service ecosystem that is fully free of discrimination. That is quite important, and there we take into account different like gender and cultural aspects. Of course, also the second thing is that we want to make sure that there's a really sort of like the MaaS services are accessible for all. And there the two pain points where there is still not necessarily like very clear solution, but where what we need to address more is first of all how to provide services for those who don't have digital access to MaaS services, and also the user group where people like unbanked or those who don't have credit cards. So there some sort of like a second channel for use of services should be maybe designed or planned. But that is again something where I think that finding the local solution, also understanding sort of like the size of the market and the specific expectation of the user is really very helpful, instead of like trying to give any global suggestion there. And regarding the inclusivity, I'm just checking if I'm missing something. So of course then the final very important point is that as a part of that market monitoring and prevention of externalities, I think it's important as a part of that local code of conduct to really also put some KPIs in place to make sure that the services are accessible for the users, what we want them to be accessible or as like regionally or like otherwise, and be available for everyone. Also there can be some KPIs for the affordability or desired modal shift, things like that can be also measured. And of course like agreeing those KPIs and measurements together, it's very important encouragement for the different market stakeholders. I give you maybe 1 more minute to submit additional questions if there are anything. But if there is no further question, I just really would like to welcome you to have a look at the playbook and use it and distribute it widely as possible. I know that already there are some more regional partnership now planned, for instance, in Belgium, where the playbook has been already used as the inspiration, and now they are deciding designing more local playbook or principles for the market based on the suggestion what we have put out there. And Julia, I don't know, my colleague, could you maybe send via chat box the link to the playbook, because that was now one question what I also see. But it's available in the Mobility as our website, and I can also post it to the LinkedIn right after this webinar. Also, we will send a follow-up email to the attendees where you can find the playbook, and also the recording of this event will be then available there. And then there is a question like, what are the eligibility requirements for joining of the MaaS Alliance, joining the MaaS Alliance? Our doors are open for public and private sector stakeholders, both, and basically there is not very strict eligibility criteria or requirements. What is common for our members is clear interest towards mobility as a service, and most of them are, or actually all of them are also very actively already working in the mobility as a service market somehow. So sort of like a positive approach to mobility as a service, but other than that, there is not really criteria. For the private sector stakeholders, there is a membership fees, but for the public sector organizations, the joining the MaaS Alliance and being part of the alliance is free of charge. So now I don't see any further questions. So yes, I hope that this was useful for you. I hope that you enjoyed reading it. And if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. And I wish you a very nice day or very nice afternoon, and I hope to see you soon, and also happy Easter. Thank you.